welcome to the Zen Studies Podcast. I'm Domio Burke. Thanks, as usual, to my supporting members, particularly to new members Ashley from San Diego, California, and Felix from Ludwigsburg, Germany. So this episode is a continuation of my reflection on Dogen's fascicle, or essay, called Bussho, or the Buddha Nature. If you haven't already listened to or read the previous episode, episode 251, the first part, be sure to do that before listening to this one. A reminder that I will be reading and primarily relying on a translation by Nishijima and Cross. And if I talk about another translation, I will mention the translator. So I'm going to launch right into it. In the passage I read and talked about last time, there was one phrase I skipped over. Quote, "It is the words. This is something ineffable coming like this. Turning the Dharma wheel." End quote. So this is something ineffable coming like this is in quotations. Now, turning the Dharma wheel means to teach and manifest the Dharma, which at one level is the Buddhist teachings and at another level is truth itself. Apparently, this is something ineffable coming like this is a quote from a koan story. So Carl Bielefeld's translation of this phrase is, "What is it that comes like this?" And note, I have been able to find a few of Bielefeld's translations online, but it appears online versions have mostly been taken down due to the recent publication of the Soto Zen Translation Project's full Shobogenzo, an 8-volume set only available in hard copy from the Japanese Soto Shu for $350 plus shipping. So I am referring to some translations and notes of Bielefeld's that I found online, but they're not that easy to find because they've been taken down officially. So back to the topic. So Bielefeld explains in a footnote to his translation of actually another fascicle where this same phrase is used. He says, quote, "This is a question famously put by the 6th ancestor Huineng upon greeting Nanyue Huairong from a dialogue often cited by Dogen." So he's now going to share the dialogue. Chan Master Da Hui of Mount Nanyue visited the 6th ancestor. The ancestor asked him, "Where do you come from?" The master said, "I come from the national teacher on Mount Song." The ancestor said, "What thing is it that comes like this?" So, end quote. When I read this exchange, I picture the student, which kind of confusingly, but in this passage is called the master because he later becomes a teacher himself. I picture the student answering the teacher's question in a literal way. Where have you come from? The student is coming from another monastery to visit the teacher, presumably to deepen his understanding of Chan. The teacher then asks a question, asking something much more fundamental. What thing is it that comes like this? In other words, as I read it, do you know your true nature and why seeking arises in you? This is our first clue that Dogen's text, and by extension the teaching, Buddha nature itself, is about our very own existential crisis. This is not about metaphysical speculation. It's not about a transcendent view you can obtain through hard practice. It's not about leaping free from the confines of small self. Buddha nature is about us. in all our humanness. When we long for authenticity, redemption, completeness, non-separation, the Dharma wheel is turning and we come up against the question, what is my true nature? The answer ends up being closer than your own nose. It ends up being what you manifest when you walk and eat and speak in your everyday life. When you study Buddhism or Zen, you may conclude that the essence of what we're trying to awaken to is impersonal. After all, we're meant to see the emptiness of self and to let go of our limited, self-centered narratives. We're taught that we're ultimately not separate from the rest of the universe. And along the independent dimension, there's no distinction between self and other. However, the Buddha way is not impersonal, even if some of the ways we talk about it may be impersonal. So as I mentioned in a previous episode, 20th century Zen master Hakuin Yasutani Roshi said, quote, "In Buddhism, Buddha nature is an intimate expression and Dharma nature an impersonal one. But whether we say Buddha or Dharma nature, the substance is the same." End quote. As I've been discussing in my Reality with a capital R series, there's only one reality, but it has many aspects. Buddha nature points toward the personal aspects of the truth. It's about our embodied human experience of the Dharma. The last sentence in the paragraph I've been discussing is, "At just this moment, the inside and outside of living beings are the total existence of the Buddha nature." And in this case, total existence and Buddha nature are both italicized and therefore emphasized. So this points us, I think, toward radical non-dualism, toward the complete lack of conflict or contradiction between total existence and individuality. When you add inside of living beings to outside of living beings, you get everything. Reality with a capital R is one seamless reality with no boundaries. And yet, Dogen does not say there are no living beings, or inside and outside are an illusion, even though along the independent dimension you might say these statements are true. But to pit the independent dimension against our embodied lived experience simply reintroduces dualism. Radical non-dualism points to the fact that the reality of inside and outside and the totality of existence are simultaneous. So, finally then, on to a few more sentences of Bussho. Quote, "At just this moment, the inside and outside of living beings are the total existence of the Buddha nature. The state is more than only the skin, flesh, bones, and marrow that are transmitted one to one, because you have got my skin, flesh, bones, and marrow." End quote. So "you have got my" is italicized. So the transmission of skin, flesh, bones, and marrow refer to a famous Zen story about Bodhidharma. He had 4 close disciples, and it came time to officially transmit the Dharma to one or more of them so they could pass it on to others. Bodhidharma asked each one of them to demonstrate their understanding of the Dharma, and they did so. And then he told the first one, "You have attained my skin." The next one, "You have attained my flesh." The next, "You have attained my bones." And the last one, "You have attained my marrow." According to the story, Bodhidharma then transmitted Huika, who attained his marrow, but it's generally understood in Zen that all four of his students were worthy students of Zen, worthy to become teachers. Here Dogen says that the total existence of the Buddha nature is more profound than some conscious understanding, expression, or manifestation, whatever the level of such attainment. The transmission of the teaching is, of course, essential and very real. Conscious realization is valuable. And there are indeed deeper and shallower levels of understanding and manifestation. But the Buddha nature is not dependent on your awakening. Not only that, you have already got the essence of such awakening. Because Dogen says, "You have got my skin, flesh, bones, and marrow." Not, "It doesn't matter if you get my skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. The Buddha nature is a vast and ineffable reality that exists anyway." Instead, he suggests you already have what Bodhidharma's four accomplished disciples had. What do you already have? That is the essence of realization, even if you're not yet conscious of it. When we hear about something wonderful that we supposedly already have, or supposedly already know at some deep level, our inclination is to sort through our views or to recall experiences we've had, looking for what Dogen is referring to. How about this? Is it this? This is a profound thought. That was a transcendent experience. I already know that everything is interconnected. I know that the small self is changeable and can't be relied upon, and that I'm supported by the rest of the universe at every moment. That must be it. Anything we can think or recall is not it, however, although certain experiences we've had may indeed be important entry gates for further inquiry. We need to remember that our being is much more than we think or remember. Our conscious narrative is only a shallow slice of who we are. When we sit in meditation, or when we expand our minds through Dharma study, we aim to explore our direct experience in a way that opens up new aspects of ourselves. We challenge our sense of I and explore different ways of being. At some point, we may see in what way we are no different than Bodhidharma's four disciples. Such a realization is deeply personal and intimate. It requires hard work and profound healing to achieve it, because it's not so difficult to comprehend. It's difficult to see because it's obscured by our self-doubt and sense of incompleteness, or by our determination to succeed and master it. On to the next few sentences, discussing various views of existence. In the Shakespeare play, Hamlet says, "To be or not to be, that is the question." Like Hamlet, we are naturally very concerned about the matter of life and death. We wonder whether our loved ones continue in some way to exist after death, or whether we ourselves will someday not exist and what that might feel like. We can only conceive of two alternatives: existing or not existing. We may be ready to accept the idea that we're composed of parts, some of which have always existed or will always exist, while other parts come into being and pass out of existence. Whatever our view of human life and death, our very concept of existence is tied to the presence or absence of discrete things or beings, real manifestations with boundaries or characteristics that set them apart from other beings or things. The word exist is meaningless without something to exist. We might say space exists, but we're kind of just using that word to indicate empty distance between things that actually exist. Space, being void, doesn't get the privilege of existing. Our usual ideas about existence are also closely tied to the passage of time. As soon as something can be said to exist, the question arises as to when it began to exist, how long it has existed, and how long it may continue to exist. Either something has existed since the beginning of time somehow, or it came into existence at some point. It will either cease to exist at some point in the future, or it will continue eternally. Of course, all of my observations about our usual ideas about existence are very limited. And Dogen challenges our limited thinking, writing, quote, "Remember, the existence described now, which is totally possessed by the Buddha nature, is beyond the existence of existence and non-existence. Total existence is the Buddha's words, the Buddha's tongue, the Buddhist ancestor's eyes, and the nostrils of a patched-robed monk. The words total existence are utterly beyond beginning existence, beyond original existence, beyond fine existence, and so on. How much less could they describe conditioned existence or illusory existence?" End quote. In the first sentence, Nishijima and Cross capitalize the first occurrence of existence, the existence described now, which is totally possessed by the Buddha nature. They do not capitalize existence when they say beyond the existence of existence and non-existence. And in that phrase, the first existence is in quotations. So it's like it's beyond the existence of existence or non-existence. The capitalized existence, which usually occurs as part of Dogen's total existence, is the subject of our investigation. Whatever it is not constrained by space or time. It does not depend on differentiating something discrete, which has boundaries or characteristics that set it apart. So Dogen says total existence, capitalized and italicized, is utterly beyond all the kinds of existence we can imagine. By exploring the list he gives us, we can try to deconstruct some of our views. After all, Buddhist study is not about accumulating more ideas, but about challenging the ones we already have, ideas and assumptions we're not even aware we're holding on to most of the time. In a footnote to his translation of Bussho, Carl Bielefeld explains, initial being, shi, u, and he gives the kanji as well. Original being, hon, u. Marvelous being, myo, u. Conditioned being, en, u. Deluded being, mo, u. These are a series of terms expressing modes of existence discussed in Buddhist thought. The first, initial being, while not itself particularly common, is here contrasted with the familiar original being, a term used to express the fundamental reality from which the phenomenal world emerges. The expression marvelous being is probably best known in the phrase true emptiness and marvelous being, where it expresses the ultimate emptiness of phenomena. The term conditioned being suggests that which exists as a result of conditions, the conditioned dharmas of dependent origination. Deluded being suggests that which exists as a result of deluded thoughts, the false objects of our misguided discrimination. End quote. As you can see, Dogen's list of types of existence, or being, which do not capture total existence, is quite exhaustive. What other kinds of being or existence are there? What is total existence? If it's not conditioned existence, it's not the existence of deluded thoughts, or the fundamental reality from which the phenomenal world arises, or the suchness apparent because of the emptiness of all phenomena. I don't know about you, but Dogen just listed a couple of my very favorite Zen concepts. Some part of my mind has been thinking, yes, he's talking about the suchness that I've talked about at length before. You know, when there's no sense of separation between you and everything else and life looks all sparkly. Okay, so maybe we get the point that total existence isn't any kind of existence we can understand or grasp with our minds. Doesn't that mean it's just impossible to know? Maybe we should just give up trying to understand. And whenever we encounter this kind of teaching in the future, we should just say, can't be put into words, can't grasp it with our minds. And then we should just leave the teaching alone to concentrate on stuff we can understand. However, if total existence is simply unknowable, undefinable, not worth contemplating, why would Dogen emphasize it so much? If the existence with a capital E he's talking about is so boundless and vague it can't be differentiated from any other concept or experience, why even write about it? Dogen may be difficult to comprehend, but he's not sloppy with language. And he's not generating words just for the sake of being verbose. Despite taking away all of our usual ideas about existence, he's asking us to carefully investigate total existence. Now, unfortunately, I can't just define total existence at this point. If I could, I would be more masterful than Dogen, and I'm definitely not. However, it may help if we think of Dogen's words as pointing toward an important truth in an apophatic way. That is, apophatic as opposed to cataphatic. An apophatic or negative approach to theology involves describing something by stating characteristics it does not have, while a cataphatic or positive approach involves trying to describe or celebrate the characteristics of the divine or the ineffable. As we grasp at an understanding of total existence using all of our usual mental tools, Dogen tells us, no, not that. No, not that either. No, not even that. We're pushed back into a state of befuddlement. What are we supposed to do? And yet before we can give up trying to understand, Dogen pulls us forward by repeating total existence over and over and doing the Japanese equivalent of capitalizing it and italicizing it. He tells us it is our Buddha nature and that by extension, it is us. We can't proceed in our usual manner, and if we want to awaken to our true nature, we can't stop. What shall we do? Until we reach this state of wholehearted and frustrated engagement, we won't discover another way to be. Or more accurately, the way forward is not a new way to be, but falling back on a more fundamental way to be. A way we've been functioning since the beginning, but have rarely trusted to guide us. Ironically, beautifully, this way of being is our Buddha nature. So we can't discover our Buddha nature until we rely on our Buddha nature. Then we know, what is it that comes thus? There's much more to Dogen's Bussho, of course. These last 2 episodes only took us through the first paragraph or so, and I even ignored a couple lines in there. And I would just keep going, but I don't want to bore my listeners who don't particularly care for Dogen or textual study. I hope to and plan to return to Bussho, but I'll be back in a week or 2 with a new and unrelated episode. I hope you'll tune in. Thanks for listening.